Welcome back to the Wall Street Podcast. Today we're diving deep into a really important piece of research from Goldman Sachs. It's their latest report, Innovating U.S. Energy, the Hydrocarbon and Renewables Race Carbonomics. Came out July 25th, 2025. And it's a big update to their 2023 model.
That's right. It factors in some major shifts, particularly the new One Big Beautiful Bill, or OBB as they call it, and also the accelerating power demand we're seeing, driven partly by AI.
So the report lays out 5 key conclusions about where the U.S. energy system is headed. And, well, it's quite a different outlook than before. Let's unpack those 5 main conclusions first. What stands out?
Okay. First off, a significant upgrade in projected hydrocarbon demand by 2030. We're talking oil up 6%, natural gas up 23%, and quite strikingly, coal demand potentially up 138%.
138% for coal. Wow.
Yes. And this implies the U.S. might become a net petroleum importer again, maybe by the early 2040s. Though, importantly, low-cost natural gas seems to keep its competitive edge.
Okay, what's the second point?
Second, government spending on green energy. It's forecast to drop quite dramatically. Yeah. Cumulatively, down by about $620 billion through 2032.
$620 billion.
Yeah. And that reduction directly translates to about $613 billion less in related infrastructure investments. This is largely because key EV incentives are being terminated under the OBB.
Got it. And the third conclusion?
Third, investment trends are really diverging now. We're seeing more money flowing into nuclear power, energy storage, carbon capture, and renewable diesel. Those areas are accelerating.
Okay.
But on the flip side, there's deceleration expected for EVs, wind power, rooftop solar, heat pumps, green hydrogen, and SAF sustainable aviation fuel.
Interesting that grid upgrades are still needed at similar levels, though.
Exactly. The grid remains a critical bottleneck, regardless of the specific generation mix.
And number 4.
Fourth, despite these shifts, the renewable revolution isn't stopping. It continues. Renewables are still projected to overtake shale oil production in terms of energy generated, probably by 2038.
So the long-term trend is still there, just maybe the path is changing.
Precisely. And the fifth point ties into the emissions impact. The U.S. Carbonomics cost curve, basically, the estimated cost to cut carbon emissions, is revised up by 90%. A huge jump.
90%. What does that mean for emissions?
It means an estimated 865 million tons more CO2 emissions annually by 2030 compared to what was previously forecast.
865 million tons.
Yeah.
Just to give context.
That's more than Germany's entire current annual emissions. So it's a very significant revision upward.
Yeah, that really changes the trajectory. So drilling into that OBBB impact, just how significant are these changes compared to what the Inflation Reduction Act set up?
Oh, they're very substantial. The OBBB effectively repeals or significantly scales back many key IRA tax credits. Take EVs.
Yeah.
Those tax credits are gone after September 30th, 2025. That's quick.
Very quick.
And for wind and solar, the credits are sharply cut back. Projects need to be in service by the end of 2027 or start construction within 12 months of the OBBB passing to get the full value.
So a much tighter window.
Much tighter. But interestingly, credits for nuclear, carbon capture, and clean fuel production, those were largely kept, some even extended. So it's this legislative shift, this picking and choosing, that directly causes that projected $620 billion drop in green incentives.
Okay, that clarifies the mechanism. Let's move on to the sectors. How do these policy shifts and demand changes actually play out on the ground?
Right. Let's start with power generation. It's still central to decarbonization efforts. Demand is still expected to nearly double by 2050, hitting over 7,600 terawatt hours. Massive growth.
Led partly by electrification and now AI data centers, too.
Exactly. Data centers are a notable new factor. They're projected to add about 1% CAGR2 to total U.S. power demand. Their share could go from 4% in 2023 to 10% by 2030.
10% just for data centers?
Yes. But the emissions outlook for power is where we see a big change. The previous forecast was a 94% reduction by 2050. Now it's only expected to be a 25% reduction.
Only 25%? Why such a drastic change?
It's because of a slower renewables ramp-up, a slower coal phase-out than previously assumed, and basically flat natural gas capacity in the projections.
Okay, what about transportation? You mentioned the EV credit cuts.
Yes, so EV adoption is now forecast to be much slower. Light-duty EV sales previously projected at 60% by 2030.
60%, I remember that figure.
Right. The new forecast is just 20% by 2030.
That's a huge drop.
It is. And as a result, CO2 emissions reductions from transport are now projected to be minimal through 2030. Basically, 0% decrease by then.
0. Okay. Moving to buildings.
Similar story. Deceleration. Residential solar and heat pump installations are slowing down, federal incentives are expiring, and while some states might offer partial offsets, it's not enough to maintain the previous pace. So the energy mix in buildings is shifting back a bit, a higher share for natural gas, slower uptake of electricity and solar.
And finally, industry. You said it was least impacted.
Relatively speaking, yes. That's mainly because the 45Q tax credits for carbon capture were largely retained. So while green hydrogen adoption might be slower because its credits phase out earlier, carbon capture volumes are still expected to ramp up.
It's really striking how these forecasts are shifting. So let's talk overall emissions again. What are the biggest changes in the total GHG forecast, and which sectors are driving that 865 million ton increase?
So the bottom line is the U.S. is now projected to hit about a 30% GHG reduction from 2005 levels by 2030. That's down from the previous estimate of 40%. That 10 percentage point difference is where the 865 million tons comes from.
And the main culprits?
The biggest slices of the U.S. emissions pie are transport, around 30%, power generation at 23%, and industry at 24%. Together, that's what, 77%?
Right.
So the slowdown in decarbonization we just discussed, especially in transport due to slower EV uptake, and in power due to the slower renewables build-out and coal phase-out, that's what's driving most of this upward revision in the emissions forecast.
Makes sense. So with this recalibration, what's the updated view on the future role of traditional energy sources, hydrocarbons specifically?
Well, natural gas looks set to remain a key part of the U.S. energy mix right through 2050. Its role in power generation is actually increasing in this forecast. And you also have very strong LNG exports projected nearly doubling by 2030 to over 20 billion cubic feet per day.
So gas remains foundational. What about oil?
Oil and petroleum products demand is expected to be pretty flat until about 2030 and then begin a gradual decline. The report actually suggests U.S. oil demand might peak in the next year or two.
That's soon.
Apparently. But because transportation makes up 70% of oil use and EV adoption is slower, oil demand stays higher for longer than in the previous forecast.
In coal, you mentioned that surprising 138% demand jump forecast by 2030.
Yes, coal demand is definitely higher in this forecast compared to the last one, primarily because its phase-out in the power sector is now seen as being slower.
It's interesting, even though clean tech investment really surged after the IRA passed, right? Up 70% quarterly through Q1 2025.
That's true, there was a significant acceleration. But the updated forecast for the average annual decarbonization investment needed through 2050 is actually lower now. It's down to about $265 billion per year, or 0.7% of U.S. GDP. Previously, the estimate was $400 billion, or 1.3% of GDP.
So less investment projected overall, even with some areas like CCUS accelerating?
Correct. It reflects that shift in policy and the expected technology mix.
So pulling it all together, given these major shifts, how does Goldman Sachs characterize the future energy balance, this hydrocarbon and renewables race? What does the finish line look like now?
Well, the report emphasizes that it is still a race, and renewables are still making huge strides, remember, expected to surpass shale oil by 2038. But hydrocarbons, particularly natural gas, are projected to maintain a leading role in the U.S. energy mix, even out to 2050. The key message seems to be that the energy transition is definitely happening, but perhaps at a slower overall pace now. And crucially, with a different mix of technologies getting investment than what was anticipated just a couple of years ago under the IRA framework, it means traditional sources stick around longer and in a more substantial way.
That is significant recalibration indeed. So for you, the listener, the takeaway here is a more complex, maybe slower, certainly different path for U.S. decarbonization than previously expected. This has obvious implications for where investment might flow, both within traditional energy and across the clean energy spectrum. It really prompts the question, how might these revised U.S. forecasts ripple outwards and influence global energy markets and investment strategies beyond America's borders? Something to consider. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.